What's up? This is Chris, and today I wanted to talk to you about this book. It's like blowing right in my face. Go that way. This book that I read while I was in Thailand, and it stood out to me in a lot of ways, and I felt it necessary to share with you. So it's called Anger by Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm probably butchering that name. Essentially, what this man talks about in this book is the root of anger and where that really comes from. It's very interesting. The first chapter, he goes into nutrition, he goes into food, and he talks about being aware of what you are consuming through the mouth in terms of nutrition and food, because he took a cow, for instance, and he said, no, it wasn't a cow, it was a chicken. And he said, if you are eating chicken, you're not just getting the protein from it, but you're getting the rage and you're consuming the anger from the chicken. And here's why. You go deep into their life and you see their living conditions, and oftentimes these chickens, these animals, are put in little tiny cages to breed a lot of them. And they are soon pecking at each other, cannibalizing one another. They're living in terrible conditions, and overall they're living in fear and rage. And that is produced and pumped into their meat, into what you're consuming. So when they kill the chicken, it's not just the meat that you are intaking, digesting, but it's all the emotions that came with it. Very fascinating concept. The fact that you consume the entirety of the food, not just that one element that you think you're taking in. Another thing that stood out to me in this book is that he went in depth about the root of anger and the inner child and what that looks like. So the root of anger, he says, a lot of it comes from our mother and our father and the way that they raised us. And it was very interesting because that resonated with me. Just a whole lot of rage there, and how you were either raised or how you were treated, or how maybe you were taught to stuff your voice down and not speak out as much. You were told to listen a lot. Or you were around a very toxic environment. And he talks about being with the wounded child, being with the child who was abandoned. And this kind of fucked me up in a lot of ways, to be honest. I'm like, oh shit, this is getting real. He says, when you get mad, you will find somebody else to blame and point the rage to. Whether it's your lover, whether it's your parent, whether it's your sibling, you will find a friend to put the blame on. And this is often the case with people who have a darker, maybe wounded background, right? With a lot of anger, a lot of rage towards the world. And he says, instead of going out and being pissed off at whoever you want to direct this anger towards, sit with yourself. Go off somewhere and find solitude. And this is a big thing that I try to incorporate in my training and in my martial arts career, is the whole solitude to your work. It's so important to figure out what is actually yours emotionally, mentally, and physically. what's authentic to you. And when you do that, you're going to realize a lot of things come up. A lot of things. Maybe you start crying. Maybe you start laughing like you never laughed before, almost like you laughed when you were 4 or 5 years old. A lot of things will come up. A lot of things trigger anger. And that word trigger is just kind of weird. Like it's so overused, and like everybody wants to talk about triggering, right? But it's very important to realize that a lot of things will trigger anger, but it's not actually the thing that is triggering you. It's not about the circumstance or the event or the person that's targeting this emotion. It's the emotion and the root at which it's coming from, which we probably never even really see or care to see. So when you go off by yourself, it's really important to let the child come up. Let him or her come up instead of stuffing it down. Like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to cry. I don't want to experience my emotions, especially for men. Another thing that blew me away in this book, and this is the last thing that I'm going to touch on. He said, when you're with yourself, do not invite the wounded child up only for the negative moments in your life. When you get pissed off at your husband or your wife, or you get pissed off at your girlfriend or boyfriend or your parents, or somebody's not listening to you, don't invite the wounded child up only when you are feeling the trauma or dark energy arise. Invite him up when you are watching a sunrise. Invite the wounded child up when you are watching a beautiful sunset, or you are walking around in a nice area on a beach, or you're really enjoying and taking in a moment. Invite that being up inside you and see what happens. Start to see the changes that arise within your body and your mind. And when you do this, it's very scary because you'll notice that your heart will start to open up a little bit more. I know it's kind of like woo-woo. It's all like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? But you will start to see your trust expanding a little bit more. Because as you invite the feeling up that was once very hurt and once very traumatized and once had a lot of dark, maybe heavy energy to it, you invite this being up with inside of you, and you say it's okay to sit with yourself in that. You say it's okay to be with yourself. Very, very important. Trust goes a long way. I think Osho, he said something along the lines of, remember the emphasis on the heart. We live in the head, and doubts are in the head. We stay closed off in the mind. We have rationalization upon rationalization. But then you go within your heart, and the heart lives in trust. The heart is open if you let it be. And when we find a way to trust, suddenly everything becomes centered. Try to work on that. Read that book. I highly recommend it, especially if you're doing any type of training, physical exercise. It's good to look at all dimensions of the human anatomy, not just the physical, but the spiritual, the emotional. Done.